kind of deja vu all over again because Catherine was actually a student of mine when I was teaching in Florence for Syracuse in the second semester that I was there in spring of 2004, right? And I was just presenting Catherine's studio project to her all over again from 2004. And Catherine was one of the best students that I've ever had. And so it's an absolute thrill to have her here visiting. And Catherine lives in North Carolina and is married to Vinny Petrarch, for any of you Italian scholars. And together they have a firm that is pretty unique in a lot of ways. They do a whole variety of work. They're both fabricators, contractors, and architects. So a lot of the work that they do is entirely in-house. They've won a number of competitions and a number of awards, including Architecture Newspaper Best of Practice in 2022, Best Small Firm in the Southeast, and multiple AIA awards. And Catherine is an adjunct professor at both Syracuse, she's on the board at Syracuse now, and NC State. And the firm used to be called Tonic, but now it's simply called Katherine Hogan Architects. So rare because not many firms are actually named after a woman. And Catherine's work is pretty amazing. And as you can see from her title, her whole lecture is going to be backwards, so it's going sort of Leonardo da Vinci all over again, right? No, it's kind of obvious why that's spelled backwards, right? Anyway, without further ado, here's Catherine. Thank you.
Is that working? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. An honor to present this lecture, and it has been amazing to see Jamie. It's been 20 years, and he's had a big influence on my architecture education. So I'd like to share start out with a set of values, kind of where we're from, what our influence is, and then talk about projects in particular. So that's me in where I grew up on 18th Street and Fifth Avenue, New York City. I think that is this working. Okay, sounds like it's going. Growing up in a dense urban environment had a big impact on me. That's Vinny, my husband and partner, and his sister Jody. Not only is it a cute picture, but there's a concrete mixer in the background. And he grew up spending a lot of time at his grandfather's house, making things, breaking things, exploring, and that's been an important part of his life and our practice and influenced how we work. That's me. Jamie hasn't seen this photo, but I was back at my studio desk for a board meeting last November, so that's where we were in Florence, and some of the sketches and, in school, traveling, being immersed in another culture, had a significant impact on my education. After I graduated from Syracuse, I worked for Will Bruder in Phoenix, and who now is practicing in Portland. But Will has been he's had a significant influence. He's been a great mentor. Super passionate about architecture. He still comes to our reviews. We travel and see architecture, and just really understanding, sort of the being on site and understanding materials and putting them together in inventive ways. Vinny worked for an architect named Frank Harmon, who's also based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he, worked with him for 10 years. He allowed him to fall into these opportunities of making projects happen by building components that would normally be beat out. This project is in the Bahamas, and the contractor quit, and Vinny flew down and did more than CA. He worked directly with the framers there, and they looked at him like, you have to know what's going on, even though you're usually, as the architect, not telling the contractors what to do. I don't know. Sorry, guys. Is that better?
Good now.
Okay. And so he had to really figure out how to make this upside down inverted truss before he spent a lot of time in the Bahamas. So he went to an AIA conference and got this book about design build. And in that, this was kind of a significant moment where you're always basing your cost per square foot, your project's cost on cost per square foot. And really, in fact, that's often 35% off. So here we are responsible for being the architect and telling you how much it's supposed to cost in a relative way off the drawings, and it's really not that accurate. That the unit price estimates are the way to be the most accurate. And so really you need to be connected to a contractor, and that's a line item budget versus this overall kind of square foot. So that was another influence. Brunelleschi, what I would say is really the last master builder. I don't know, Jamie, you can correct me on this slide, but really when Alberti, came into the picture, he was really sort of passionate about the architect and the builder being separate, whereas Brunelleschi won the commission for the Duomo because he figured out not only the design of the building, but also how it would be constructed and the formwork and how to design that as well. And also this is, practices like Frank Lloyd Wright, where the architects in the office would go to the site and really experience construction as it happened. So this is the black and white diagram is a diagram, kind of a traditional model of architecture practice. So the owner has a contract with the designer and a contract with the contractor, but when they're never really talking or contractually bound. So our consultants and our subcontractors can't get information and collaborate early on in the process. Whereas in our practice model, we find that these overlaps with a different colored blue is where real design opportunities happen. And so because we act as, or have historically in our practice acted as both the architect and Vinny is also an architect and licensed general contractor, we can really get a lot of information and overlap early on. So we really value taking architects out to the site and making, and then taking models and design to the site. So this is our framer, Fernando, who framed many of our projects. And we brought him the framing model, and that was enough for him to kind of stretch the strings and figure out the project. And so like in many practices, we go from an idea or a diagram, and then we jump to a model, which often gets messy because we're changing it. And then from that, we could do probably a few less drawings because we're the ones building it, and we won't change order ourselves, but really we would build a mock-up, so go directly to the roofer and say, let's confirm the conditions of the, the siding and all of the window details. And then the last image is, standard standing seam metal roof, that roofing material that with 3 different widths just put together in a different way. And so that's Michael's house. He's a musician, 4-story house in the middle of Pittsburgh, North Carolina. This is Ron, our roofer. Nick and Morgan worked in our office a few summers ago. We always have students spend time in the summer in our office, and what we like to do is really get them connected and be on the site and talk to those making. I think we learned so much from our subcontractors, the insights that you can't just get from doing the drawing. So we were trying, he's done a lot of our projects. This is Core 10, and they work directly with him to come up with this kind of custom siding. It's actually not such an expensive material, but then you just think about how you could put it together in a different way with these reveals and kind of the lengths and widths of the material. And Ron also helped us with this house, which is also Core 10, but similar material, different project and client. He's just a small couple people in his office, subcontractor locally, who's done some really creative things. This is in our shop. I'll show you a series here. We were building a house for clients in the middle of COVID, and they had a bank loan, which means there was no more money than what they had. And so we had 3D printed this model of a custom metal siding. I don't know what I'm doing. We realized that it would be too expensive for what we had in the budget. There were some things that got more expensive during COVID. And so we decided to use a cement board siding and look at it in a different way. And so we took the model and we put tape on it and thought about it in a really messy way, but kind of figured out what we could do. And luckily our clients were really engaged in this process and they were open to different ideas. And so we thought about a traditional board and batten with fiber cement board siding, and then you know, how we could reinterpret that in a different way. So that's Paul and Judy, our clients, and they love color. She's a chef. They own a restaurant and they're musicians, and they just wanted something really fun. And so that's what we did. It looks like you can see Davis is kind of dressed in one of what Paul would normally wear as a shirt, but it looks like one of Paul's shirts. And really, it just gave them a unique house for with pretty cost-effective materials. And really, we had to make those choices and be inventive with those choices, given the budget and the time of construction. So in our place, many of our projects have been what we call bank loan architecture. So our clients are really great. They're really passionate about doing something different and not just buying a standard house, but they don't necessarily have the resources to put a down payment on a piece of property and then pay the architect's fees. And so what we could do as the general contractors, we could have them pay a small percentage of the design fee and then roll the rest of the design fees into the construction loan because we were the ones getting the construction loan. And so we really felt like that was making architecture more accessible and to a larger group in our place, and allowed us to expand our reach and have more projects because we could do both architecture and construction. So this is an example of one of those houses. This is for John and Stacy. John Cravel said, as time goes forward, we're catching up to the past in a way, and we saw these agricultural structures in the landscape of Hillsborough that were rusted and kind of had a more of a negative connotation that they were falling apart. And so we saw that as something really beautiful, that how could we reinterpret that? And we also knew that with a $300,000 budget, we needed to think like a traditional spec home builder. So this image of house and how we could make minor adjustments that wouldn't add a lot of cost. So we could maybe tilt the roof in a single tilt. We could expand the program based on the inside with small cantilevers that were not in steel but in wood, that you might have like a bay window or fireplace, and just really think about how we could use the material and create a different form. And so we worked directly with the concrete subcontractor. If we had given them the plan, there are no right angles, they probably would have charged us twice as much because it's different and they had to think about it differently. But we just worked with them on site and said, it's still the same formwork, it's still the same material, it's still the same amount of time, there's just a few different angles. And so that was a way of maintaining costs, working directly with them. And then from there, we extruded the framing. And then we had Ron with us again. We used Corten with flat panel and then unperforated Corten. These small fins on the front where we could cantilever out and create depth and shadow and a screen that made it different with just using more cost-effective material. That's Ian and Madison, their Lego model when we first started the project. But we see the whole family as our client. And that's one of the infrequent days we get snow in our area. So this is one of the first projects of our firm. This is how the structure was found. It's kind of a mid-century modern steel frame. And really, we work with a lot of existing buildings in our practice. And so at that time, it was how could we really rethink this frame and do everything to make it into a really interesting project. The clients at first said, there's no way I'm buying that house. But then they went and visited all of the case study houses in California, and they came back and they said, you know what, let's do this project. And so now it's a house for John and Molly, and they collect their art. And, you know, this wing on the roof was probably would have been beat out if another contractor had built it. But at the time, our firm took on that piece, and it's really a great place where they use every day to have meals outside. Another way of, you know, working is we presented this model to our clients, and they really got it. They said we had showed them more realistic renderings and of different iterations, and they really didn't like it, but for some reason they really got this, and they said that's the project. But from that, early on, we like to jump into, you know, detailed drawings to understand how are we going to make all of these white frames and make them consistent and maintain the proportions. And so that, working backwards, we very early on, we go into like, how will this be made? How will we construct this? Confirming all of the details before, and then we use that to influence the design. And so building models, and this is the project. It's a house in Raleigh. We were just the architect for this project, and another contractor built it. But trying to maintain the diagrammatic idea of that first model through understanding how something is made and constructed. As Jamie said, we teach. This is from Syracuse, and we like to do these big drawings and models and different studies, kind of how we work in our own practice. And then this is from the studio at NC State. Right before COVID, then we brought scaffolding into the studio. It was awesome. We were making all sorts of panels and mock-ups, and then it went to Zoom, but this is a digital fabrication studio, so exploring how things are made. We torture our children. That's Elizabeth and Marissa with architecture. We make them drive around and see a lot of buildings. I think that's really important as an architect for all of you. You'll see their masks in COVID. We drove to Kentucky, and just really being able to understand materials and light and experiencing architecture is so important to us. This is Stephen Hall's cabin. You can rent it on Airbnb. It's pretty awesome. Our kids loved it. So we are based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're in this really great area called the Triangle. So Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. A lot of universities, a lot of research. It's not a huge population. I mean, it's growing quickly, but between the three, it's a little bit over 1 million, and I think that number has probably even changed by now. But you're probably familiar with many of the universities, a lot of great art and culture. Many of you know us for this, especially this time of year, and so that's where we are. This is our studio, big open space. And, you know, we like to have a lot of models, pin things up. Everybody's working together. It's one big table. You hear the good things and the bad things, all the phone calls, but we try and have a really open, collaborative environment and believe that good ideas come from everyone. I think many will say that this is when we actually got our office right, because we used to have the shop in the front, and then we didn't have a shop, and it transitioned quite a bit. But this is a steel door, and it's very messy, this picture. But on one side you see our studio, and on the other side is our shop. This is when we were building the pavilion for Raleigh Arts, and I think we really believe our practice model, and we live it. So we're always going back and forth between the two. That's Marissa in a hammock when we were studying, doing mock-ups. We built this pavilion before we took it outside. And then on site again with Fernando. So all of these realms have an influence on how we practice. And this was from the other day. We're building this big framing model of a house that we've been working on for a while, multi-generational house. And then The other image is confirming the window details and how to address having a good thermal break. So we're just doing some mock-ups, but we'll randomly do things like that throughout the office. This is kind of a slide with a lot of information, but the main point is that we, and this is how I'll frame the lecture, take on all of these roles. So we're only the architect, we are the contractor and architect-led design build. We like that better than design build, because we are building because we love architecture. And then we built for other architects. I'll show you a couple of those slides, which is really a great experience. And then we've developed a few of our projects. So you can see a lot of houses between 2003 and 2019, and we were trying to make the number of images above 2019 grow, and that's really why we transitioned the practice and renamed the practice, because we wanted to start doing more public work. So again, these are the different models of practice. So we're kind of messy. We don't just think there's one approach. For us in our place, we've had to kind of expand and do different things to survive. This is one of also an early project of the office at the North Carolina Museum of Art. And this one is design build and architect and contractor. But there was an outdoor classroom, and in the art park, we have a great art museum locally, but also a great outdoor sculpture park. And so this is in our old shop. This is building the components. And so they were kind of made like Tinker Toys in our shop and then brought out and assembled. And this is, pavilion for outdoor classroom, but it has taken on people who've gotten married here, they do yoga here, there's class trips. And I think that's really an amazing thing, that the first intended use is not always the use of the project. And that's what has really inspired us. That's our daughter's class many years ago for field trips. But when someone is in our office one summer and she brought this picture and her friend asked, that's not Vinny asking me to prom, that's when someone in our local high school. But I think this is a really pivotal moment where you see how the community responds to your architecture and does things that you wouldn't think about, like putting flowers in the perforated metal. And that's really the foundation for what inspired us to continue to do more public work. So this is Larry and Angie from Brooks Scarpa. They had a client, one of their first projects in Los Angeles, bought some land in Hillsborough and decided to build a house. And so they were the local architect and the contractor. And it was great working with them. It's kind of like having an opportunity to work in someone's studio and collaborate. And I think we see it again, concrete, no right angles, just working with the same subcontractors that we always do. But this is a really different house. And I think we really believed in helping Larry and Angie realize their vision. And so in that case, we understood why they would make things differently or want to change things. I think, we're all there trying to realize the best design possible. And so this is how we would communicate. Larry's on the West Coast, and that's our client, Steve. Do you want your spring point to be at B or A? And we would confirm things and we stretch strings, and we really just wanted to get it exactly how they wanted. So it's this one-story house with 30-foot tall peaks on a large parcel in Hillsborough. And it's really, I don't think they're in process of having final photographs, but that was a great project to be. So I think why we show this is, most of our business is not coming from development, but I think as an architect, to understand the systems at play, because there are a lot of people using Zillow that are not necessarily interested in architecture, or that's not their main goal. But I think if you understand like what the systems are and how to use them, that's how you begin to have an influence. And so we bought a piece of property. That's what our clients bought it from us for, but and it was in a neighborhood that we have about 5 other projects. There's a really steep topography. So we understood it was a leftover lot, and we did a quick sketch and put it on Zillow, and we got a client. They bought the land. They hired us for design and construction. And so I think that was kind of an interesting process. And then this is really the main, we've worked over, it's been probably about 7 years to really transition into more public work. There were a lot of RFQs that we sent out, but they said no. And I just say that because once you start in a particular project type, sometimes it's hard to really change. And, you have to keep really being passionate about it and trying to change the perception. So often that means starting out with really small projects. We were, after them telling us no, 2 years later, we submitted it. We got on, it's going a little slow, but like an on-call contract with our public school system, Wake County Public Schools. And we were so excited. And then we went to, they were like, we have this project for you. And we showed up and they said, well, the total budget is $150,000, not our fees, but the whole budget. And so we said, well, okay, we're going to give it everything we have. And, I think you can have an impact at any scale and any budget. But, that's not the only project type we could do to survive. So I think this was our first chance of really convincing the client to work with us on future projects. So this was the existing space. I noticed that students don't have anywhere to sit. It's pretty dark. It's a large high school in Raleigh, Southeast Raleigh. And what we realized is that with our budget and thinking as if we were going to build it, we would have to use what's there. So painting the space white was probably one of the bigger impacts and would have been a fair amount of the project that had a big, that worked pretty well. But then this stair was overstructured, and so we figured we could just graft on with an off-the-shelf material, steel, and use that. We wouldn't have to add any more structure and create pretty cost-effective plywood benches. And then we turned the stair into a light fixture because that's what the space was really lacking. There were a lot of trophy cases, and the principal at the time, the school's exceptional at sports, but she said, I'm proud of our history of, of athletic achievement, but I want the students to be on display, and I want to create a space that feels collegiate and encourage them to go on to the next step after high school. So within the depth of the trophy cases, we didn't add any new structure. We knew we couldn't. We just made a place to sit. And so those are their writing surface tables. Now they have art, and it's really nice to be in a space that's larger, but you can have a smaller conversation, so you can be a part of the bigger community, but still private. The light fixtures in the space didn't come out so well at first time the contractor made them. So we told him we would take these on. And so this is our shop before we had renovated. And we fabricated those for him. But really with $150,000, we worked to transform this space and gave 1,600 students a place to sit. And this is used for magnet fairs and a lot of other events. And I think that's our girls. What's really nice about this is when you do work in your community, they came back to the school for a basketball camp. They play a lot of basketball, but with a small $150,000 project, it received national recognition. And I think it just really shows that with a small budget and small scale, you can still have a big impact. So this is with the same client, and because we worked really hard on that first project, they gave us a study for a $10 million project.
We want to switch it out.
We can try a different one, yeah.
Okay.
You want to turn that one off?
Microphone, microphone.
That's my high school. Okay. So this is they gave us a study, and then in our county school system, they were trying to figure out how to save existing buildings instead of tear them down. And so we have $10 million to build a new school in our community is around $40 to $50 million. So we said that if you distribute those funds between 4 schools, you can have an impact on 4 times as many students and renovate a school versus tearing it down and just building one new one. And so that was kind of the principle of the project, testing out this new idea. And so what we, not in this section, but throughout the building, the hallways are sloped to a non-ADA slope, which we couldn't change. So we were limited to what's called an alteration level 1 permit, which meant we couldn't change any of the interior walls. We could just basically do 1-for-1 replacement of fixtures and finishes, and then our real design opportunity was the reflected ceiling plane. So this is the original architect, I think, in terms of they were very thoughtful about natural light, so there are these moments of clear story lighting throughout the building, but we really wanted to unify that as one element. And so we introduced one color and kind of cleaned up all of the spaces and renovated the classrooms, but really acknowledging the natural light in the space. And so that's the existing classroom. And then introducing color in a different way and really opening them up and enhancing the natural light. And so this is the county school system has their standard materials and things, but really looking at how we can use them. And also looking at how you think about the project overall, how it would be made, and the diagram of the idea, going back and doing drawings like this is really important to us. But really all we had were metal studs and sheetrock to kind of make a difference. So just thinking about that as our palette. And also knowing that this is the contractors, this is the school system, these are our clients, this is everyone making the decisions beyond the architecture and the drawings and the models that we worked with, at our OAC meetings every week. And so before and after, I think this is the image that was on the poster. But really with that budget, it was under 10 million to renovate 70,000 square feet. How could we have an impact and save an existing building? This is so I moved to North Carolina 17 years ago to work for a nonprofit called Design Corps. And it was a 1-year AmeriCorps fellowship. And we focused on working with the farm worker population, which is one of the largest farm worker populations in the country, is in North Carolina. And we did a market structure, but the housing really, it's never really been built. There's not much that didn't changed. And so the same nonprofit approached us later, and we wrote and to receive a grant from the AIA National, and so they gave it to us in support of furthering farm worker housing. So we used that money to hold a series of participatory workshops with farm workers. This is a farm in Brevard, and they were pretty progressive, probably were better to their farm workers than most, and kind of integrated in making sure that they had a good place to live. But that was our client, really. And so that's the western part of our state. It's a farm that grows herbs, mostly. And so this is what is considered good farm worker housing. So they toured and looked at precedents and showed this to us, that this met the Department of Labor standards. It's clean, but it's still nowhere near what we might all hope, right? And I think you'll notice how many people are in a room, how you're you're always with other people. You never have any privacy. And so we had a series of workshops. The owners of the company left, so it was just us and the farm workers and then the nonprofit, and they speak Spanish and they helped with translation. And so we presented our ideas. And I think, what was really interesting is most of them live in mobile homes now, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and they're kind of falling apart, which is what normally happens. And so what we showed them, let's see if I can go to that side, but it's so we basically showed them a plan that was a 2-bedroom unit with a bathroom, and it was nice and clean, and we're really excited about it. And you can see right there these drawings, like we really don't like this. It's not a good idea, because to them, having to share a room with 2 or more people was just not. They never had their own personal space, and so what really resonated. This is kind of what was there, and the site of going back and putting individual units was to have all of these, almost like, not cell like is the wrong word, but an individual room with a window and being able to close the door for privacy, that even if they had half or a third of the amount of their bedroom, that would be really much better. And so we took that and we decided to, for 30 workers, how can we rethink this? And I think that's a really important moment, because even though we didn't want to hear they didn't like it, it was actually the best feedback. And that's, we really believe in having those conversations with our clients and engaging the end user. And because of the grant, we were able to have those, and we don't always, the farm worker community doesn't always have access to an architect directly. So we're trying to think of ways of coming up with a shared public space and then these individual units, and providing more bathrooms than are required by the standards, and having areas that you could be part of a larger group or also retreat to your own space. And then we've been processing how we can make it in a factory and deliver it to the site. That's been interesting, because a lot of the manufactured housing companies can only go a certain distance, or they don't want to change their design because it's already been permitted and it meets code. And so it's been an interesting series of discussions. The nonprofit secured additional funding from a local foundation that is covering the soft costs of the project. So we're kind of SDDD of trying to figure out how to make this, and it has to be focused on farms in Western North Carolina. The original farm decided not to do this project. And I think that was Melinda, who works at the nonprofit. She said she's been working on farm worker housing for 30 years. And she said, you asked me at the beginning why this doesn't happen, and here we are at the end, and you're not moving forward, and it's because they prioritize other things on the farm besides housing. But we're developing a unit for 6 workers, so which will probably be more tailored to a lot of the farms in the area. And so that's we'll take what we've learned from this, and we're working on adapting that unit. So using more durable materials on the outside, but really maintaining that connection to the site. And hoping that if we can have an impact in Western North Carolina, this is kind of a map of the density of housing population throughout the state, how this can be transferable. This is going back to our pre-K center, the same client that we did the elementary school with and the stair. So we've been working, we're now on our 7th project with them. And it's become really good. So you never know where those small projects will lead. But for us, this was a really exciting project, because this is the first freestanding pre-K center, so public pre-K. Usually schools have 2 classrooms, elementary schools, and this was an independent center. So on an occupied campus of an elementary school. So we had to think about how to get a new building on this campus. And I think beyond the architecture, this building addresses food security, emotional support, there's speech therapy, academic support. This is a fair amount of Title I students in this building, and it's all public education. And so I think it's architecture can address a lot more than just the building. But this is early on, just, you know, in the process, we met with all of the pre-K teachers and staff, and they had some of the best insights. This was very early on because this was a project type that the county school system had not done, we had not done, they had not done, and so we were all really learning together. And in addition, we removed some contaminated buildings, and so we didn't add new impervious surface, which helped us from a permitting standpoint, but what was great is that we added this new pre-K building and then gave a walking track, a constructed wetland, which we needed for construction, and more playgrounds to the existing school. So with the building, we enhanced the overall campus, and it's an environmental connections magnet school, so they can use the wetland for learning opportunities. I think this will play. The building's built, but I just show this because for us, this was our largest project, freestanding building we've done as a practice, and it's going kind of slow, but you know, trying to figure out how to have construction happen on an occupied campus while the other students are still there, how to you know, phase it with the wetland and the other components of the site were all things that I think we learned through doing construction, because we imagined how would we build this and really trying to make that clear and easy for our client. And so this is really 8 classrooms surrounding a garden, and everyone has played with these manipulative blocks, but the idea of making each classroom unique, and the way of doing that is to have access to natural light and really activate that, the ceiling. And it was great because the you know, standards of pre-K are related to daycare, and we had to provide direct access to the outside, so we couldn't have a double loaded corridor, and really that allowed all of the classrooms to be around a garden. And so you can see that each kind of monitor, there's different colors throughout the school. There's the 8 classrooms that are in pods with bathrooms and recreation rooms, and then there's one room when you come into the building that allows the teachers to understand the students before they get there. That's kind of in the middle near the big lobby. And so that was a really key component of this project. And, you know, using the brick and metal of the existing buildings on campus, but thinking about it in a different way, and then adding color. They're the caterpillars at the So this is a cement board siding that was painted, and you know, as they go from caterpillars to butterflies, the colors change on the building. But I think, you know, these light monitors, cursory windows, were really important because it's kind of the pre-K version of learning commons. When you come in and feel comfortable when you first enter, there's still the recognition of this element that is repeated throughout the classrooms a lot of times. And really thinking about the section of the project. I think, you know, these were so important to us in kind of making the spaces unique, and we felt that we really wanted to do this for the teachers and the students, but there were probably 3 or 4 occasions where the planners or maintenance and operations said, there's no way we're doing these. They're gonna cause problems, they're gonna leak. Well, it's not a skylight, it's a clear story, so it's just going to be detailed like a window. It will be fine, and then they tried to get rid of them again, and we said, and because we kind of looked at how much we built a mock-up and we looked at how much they would cost. It was probably $200,000 over a $15 million project. So it's not really that much money. You shouldn't get rid of these. And then they were trying again. And the teachers, we met with them and we said, they're trying to get rid of these. And so they did their own research on the value of natural light in classrooms. And they were able to, we kept them in the project. And so we built this mock-up because we wanted to understand it in details. And we have a local doghouse competition. So we built, that's our dog Oscar. That's the only time he's ever been in here. He hates it. then Ava came along. But, you know, that's then Marissa standing in the full-size frame of these clear-story monitors that are on the building. And so from that scale, we really believed that they needed to happen. And so we were doing everything we could to keep them. That's Dawn and Sherry. Sherry's the principal, the head, and Dawn is the lead of early education in our county. They were at the early meetings. They love the building, but it's just been really special to work with them on this project and then really think about how light moves throughout the day and how that can become, you know, a learning opportunity for the students as well. And that you recognize this on the outside of the building, these light monitors in the section within. And so that's when they become the butterflies on the back, more orange and yellows. They have a really large playground with tricycles and play equipment and lots of fun things. We photographed this recently. It just completed, so it's winter time. But there's a lot of landscape and but really just, you know, this connection between the classroom and the seeing light from above and then seeing outside. The walls get filled with teaching materials, and so you can't really have that many more windows than what we had on the one on the main kind of area. So this was even more important to us, and different colors throughout the building. So I think I'll play this video. I don't know if it will work, but this is at the ribbon cutting, and it's really special that these 4 and 5-year-olds have so much confidence that because they have this building.
We have time for some questions for Katherine. I'll just let you guys start, actually. Katherine, I love the lecture, and sorry about the mic. Anyway, I love that you fought the good fight on those light monitors, and I've been in part of those experiences, and it is a fight, and you have things in the project that you love, and people are trying to take them out and convince people what the importance is. But I sort of came out of the lecture thinking of the word engagement in terms of your work, because I love performance-based, it's amazing, but it's also, it seems like your practice engages in a different way, where like you're using diagrams to talk to a contractor about, hey, this isn't going to be that much more expensive. Look, it's the same thing you do here, or you'll engage with the community with 3-dimensional blocks so that they're actually showing you how things work. And so I think that's just an amazing thing for our also the students to hear, that these things take that, right? Because once that student engages, and there's a chance that these things are going to happen. And as a practice that does low budget, fairly low budget work ourselves, like Silo does it, how have you found big versus small projects in terms of this engagement? Like, are you still doing that with these framing models, these diagrams? Are you still using these methods to convince people, or as the projects grow, is there less of that?
I think we still do that, and we're working on expansion or addition to a technical community college, or it's in Hillsborough for Durham Tech, and we're starting this process into all the models and the blocks and everything. It's a big group of trying to get everyone to kind of engage in the process. But I think what was really interesting also is that we went to the interview. There had been a study done where it could be addition on the building. And there were 2 locations, or 3 actually. And so we went into the interview, and Vinny and I were thinking about it before, and it's like, well, I think we should put it in a different location, maybe purely from a utility standpoint, how much cost that would be, how you mobilize, where you put materials, you could just extrude the structure. And we told them in the interview, which is a way that they get immediately not hired, or if they actually enjoyed and valued that different thinking. And so we did get the project, but I think it was really thinking about it from how do you make something. And so I think that's maybe I don't know if that's fully answering your question, but I think we're always, I think things are kind of messy, they're not perfect, and like we're always learning from these pieces. And if you can really allow people to engage in the process, then you know why they made decisions versus at the end they ask you, why did you do this? And you're like, well, we did this,
Yeah.
We made that choice because it was more expensive, or we made this choice because something else. It's really.
That was interesting on the light monitors. I was thinking one of the assets to those is that it provides such character for like when you show the outside photos, you can see these things popping up all over the place, and I love that. But there are those things that you can't necessarily, that might not be meaningful to a client.
It's
but,
not.
But the light might be, and so that's the way to argue that versus the formal character of it, for instance.
Well, I think we had moments where it's just going to be one brick box. And
Yeah,
yeah. So there's the like architecture of it, and then there's the spatial quality of information. Yeah, I could have done that.
So congrats on all the success. We're sitting in our seats a while ago, and we had advice on the tasks we should be doing now, the pursuits we should be going after, the firms we should be looking at. I'm only in my second year, worked an internship, and it's nothing like what your firm's doing. You're taking all the lessons that we're doing now, and I think you're doing it very successfully, and I like it. But I don't know what I need to do from here until eventually I get to your position one day.
I think in general, if you maintain a curiosity and passion, you're probably feel. I think like early on, it's so important to visit architecture and to constantly like be a student. You're still learning always. And then I don't know. I mean, you can't. Every experience in a firm, big or small, is going to teach you something, either what you like or don't like. And I think it all has value because you learn from other firms and they learn from us. But I would, I think it's really doing drawings, making models, but also like just trying to learn and go figure out what type of practice you would like to explore. I mean, I think it's not always linear, but if you're consistently doing things, then you'll grow and figure it out.
Caleb?
You had mentioned earlier talking with clients, particularly with that preschool project, and how the conversations that happened between you and the client in that project were productive. And I just wanted to know if there was anything else you could maybe describe about the differences you have when working with a client for your educational projects versus maybe your more residential or other types of projects.
The difference between residential and like what the client experience is like, or
yeah, like the conversations that go on between the clients. Yeah.
well, I think I really value all of our residential and house projects. I think we've learned so much, and we still are working on them. I think depending on the client, the conversations are very, they're sort of like focused on the individuals that are occupying that house. Whereas on the larger projects, it's about like there's 18 students in a classroom that are going through all the time. And so it's kind of like a bigger picture in a way. But, I think like building a house, you're learning how a client wants to live, and there's going to be slight adjustments, or there'll be pieces of program that will shift you, but then we don't know more than the teachers that are in the building every day with the 4 and 5-year-olds. So I think those insights of how a building functions and needs to function are really important and different.
please.
Thank you for your presentation. I think you did a great job. I'd like to know what's, we all know about the pros of the being architect and builder at the same time, builder at the same time. I'd like to know what's the con, in your opinion, because being outsider and insider at the same time, for me, is a little.
How much time do you have? Because I'll tell you a lot. I mean, it's like a love-hate relationship. It's such a, it gives you such an insight and such a value. I mean, like, you're working on a public 27,000 square foot pre-K, and then you're calling to have the dumpster changed out. Calling in an inspection or making sure the porta comes. You know, it's like, and then you have thousands of receipts versus invoices for design. I mean, I think there's a lot more. Insurance policies, there's things like that. I think it allows, you know, the insights are, and I think like it's allows you to connect more with people who are actually making or doing it. I don't know if that we probably could go on about the things that make it hard because sometimes I don't want to do construction, but I don't think we ever get us started.
Is there a question back there?
Thank you so much for all the details you provided. It was so great to see the process, the different projects approaches. One question that comes to my mind is that, like, in every project, like architects, designers, and also builders make different decisions. And sometimes you have different ideas that might not align at the same time. Like in these kind of cases, or sometimes you have an idea and design and like the budget and the building process doesn't allow you to move forward with it. Like in those kind of moments that those parts of the project, what could be the main objective or the main thing that you would keep or like help you through the decision-making process and narrowing down the options on, you know, what would you consider the most important thing to like make a decision or not make it, or keep an idea or and leave the others forward?
I think there's never one thing that it's not, you don't, I mean, it often comes down to budget, site, program, it's like a high level. I think what, especially because spinning will keep designing all the way to the end of a project, it's like you can't really, you always have to have another solution and not fall in love with one thing. And when you can do that, then you can often get to another opportunity, like the art museum pavilion. There was a completely different site and they changed it in the middle of the project. And I think it made the project better, but at the time, I'm sad about it. You know, you fall in love with this idea, but then you have to change. So I think it's, I mean, there's a lot of things that time frame, schedule, budget, and the decision of your client.
Yes, so I see some of the projects that you presented today are additions or renovations to existing buildings. When you do something like that, do you try and respect the original architect's intent, or do you sort of go off and do your own thing?
There's a one that project there, second from the bottom all the way. That's a renovation of a building that was, we renovated it twice actually, and so we tried to respect the original architecture, but we added that the stair and elevator tower. There's always a lot of glass, but we needed to add a shading element because it was 80 degrees in the summer and never cooled off. So I think you can find, like, working with existing buildings kind of gives you a set of constraints, and it limits you in some ways, not in a bad way, but like you start to work with what you have. So I think we've done, there was one 410 project that was a modern addition to a 1913 house. And I think it's just really, I don't know if we go in with a preconceived idea, but you're gonna have to let the project tell you what to do for the existing.
Hey, great job. You fought some good fights, and I did schools 12 years, so I'm having some moments of thinking back how hard it is. Because a lot of times with school clients, they'll say, I don't want you to do anything that hasn't been built. We're not interested in new materials, new technology. I don't want to take the risk. We're risk averse. And someone told me once, they said the difference between when you start doing schools versus residential, they're not writing the check. The homeowner writes the check. The superintendent is spending somebody else's money.
No, I think it is.
Yeah, it's a big deal. That check's harder to get, from the homeowner.
A lot harder.
But I'm trying to think what you're asking. What are the tools that I used when I was in school before you, and that you learned from Jamie, and what translates? I think one of the big things is communicating and knowing your client. And I really like the way you brought us into your project. It's really good. Maybe your kids coached you in the school a little bit. But when you sit with a superintendent or homeowner and you ask them, can you read plans? Sometimes they're really honest. They say, I don't know how to read a plan, but if you show me a model, I get it. And the superintendent can get up there in front of a board, the audience, and explain plans like a weatherman. And just, oh, here you come here. So understand your client. What do they know? Versus if your audience is Jamie or your audience in a school, you're presenting to an instructor or professor, knows what a plan is, knows what a model is. So I think the takeaway for me when I saw this reminded me, try to understand what your client is, what their capacity is to gauge what you're doing, and what tools you use. Because you went from sketch to model, different scales, mock-up, full scale. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think you're right that you have to communicate with people. Sometimes the client won't see it until it's actually built, like really visualize it. But that's, yeah, to have different ways of communicating an idea.
So following up on that, I was reminded from some of your earlier projects, you were talking about complex foundation geometry and how you had just given the contractors the drawings, they would have freaked out. It reminded me of some projects from maybe 20 years or so back where the architects didn't produce drawings for the foundations, they produced templates. Full scale, CNC cut out of plywood. They said to the contractor, here, lay this down on the site, use that to lay out your formwork. You don't have to take any measurements. Just make sure it's level. And that's, again, one of these alternative communication. You don't use a drawing, you use an actual kind of simulacrum of what's going to be built.
Yeah.
And it created, in that case, I think this was Bill Massey who told the story of this, created an opportunity for them to say, well, okay, so here's the foundation template. And, let's just pick the whole thing up and move it over a little, rotate it, and they got a better relation to the site by having this template of the foundation of the building on site instead of just studying it in drawing or in a model on the desk or. So these mixed media ways of communication can really add to the project.
Yeah, you can have 400 sheets of drawings and the contractor still gets it. So I think like a mock-up that you're supposed to do on site has a lot of value. Figuring out how to different ways of doing it. If they'll let you do that.
Right. They trust you.
Right.
Thank you again for a beautiful presentation, a beautiful work. One of the things that comes through so powerfully is your intense relationship with color. And I'm wondering how you've nurtured that over the years, where you think of that as coming from. Is there a particular set of artists or a particular body of work that you're kind of drawn to? Or how did that develop for you?
I don't know. I think that question actually came up. I'm not sure, and maybe Vinny and I should figure out our answer.
Craft a response.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd say like with our public buildings and our schools, they use a lot of color in school projects. They think that that's probably the solution to learning environments, and I think we really had to engage with color, use it in a different, or figure out how we wanted to use it. I think this big bright yellow, when we first looked at it, the whole room was yellow. We questioned whether what we had done, but I think like it does make it have an impact, and so I think we're probably still learning. Or I don't know if there's a particular influence, but we definitely like to do big mock-ups and understand it. And I think trying to see how they work together, the colors work together. I don't know if I have a good enough answer for that, but I'll think about it. I think it just through the process. But I think it's great. When you have sheetrock and paint and metal studs, you have to use,
Color's free.
Yeah.
Any last question?
Are there any tools you suggest that we learn along the way? CAD programs, hand tools, anything else?
Say that again.
Any tools you suggest that we learn along the way? CAD, hand drawing, hand tools in particular?
I think you have to try it all, figure out what your way of designing is. I know everyone's using Revit now. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to learn to use it in school, but there's CAD, and I think making models in addition to being good at 3D visualization is really important, because that physical model, that's stand up or not, really understanding how you would make it. Models that are about an idea, but models that are also about assembly, I think are really helpful. But I don't know, I think you just have to figure out what, explore it all while you're in school. This is the time. And look at precedents of
What role does hand drawing?
I should know. We do, it's interesting because, you're kind of sketching, or a lot of our presentations, especially with Vinny, it's like he'll draw live for clients, and I think that's been really cool and powerful, and we learn that in Zoom and teaching with the options, but
Maybe a little dangerous too.
yeah, but a way of showing options really quickly, and I think that being able to iterate. I think we do, it's more of as a process of ideas versus a product for a client,
I want to say real quick, thanks for those who stayed for the questions. We didn't have as much of a mass exodus during the questions. So thank you all for staying. And thanks so much for the lecture.